entertainment.
So many things have been said about Star Wars, you can see with the hundreds of videos about it. Although most of them just post any old dribble for views which gives them money. So their motives are easy to see, and yet, they are also not able to see through the characters and theory plots. They post out in mass, hoping that many will be foolish enough to add a view to the count, talk about hidden agendas. But no one questions why Star Wars came to be what it was and what it has become. Nor do they comment on the reasons millions are fascinated with its episodes and can't wait for the next film, which is why so many posts lure people in with fake exclusives, trying to get one up on their competition. But what does that have anything to do with this post? Well, that's simple. People don't recognize those who proclaim good but are really doing bad. It stems from the little posts right up into the major organizations and those that run this unbalanced world. That is what the Star Wars saga is all about, the group of the few that recognize the bad of the Empire, and unite to rebel. Many people though still try to live out the characters, one group in particular. The many self-named Jedi that runs through social media and all across the globe. We have been watching this for many years as well, as they are the many organizations that try to behave in the same manner. For most fall very short and are only influenced by the red herring of their order, the lightsaber. Although it is interesting to watch how this has become a global theme, with the many training and competitions that are now currently becoming more popular. It is all very well, but to think they are acting like Jedi just from their skills with a lightsaber, they surely not. They don't recognize its meaning. Nor are the many social media that use the same name, such as the Jedi orders that fill the chat apps, or the self-named Jedi Church, which if anything, is totally the opposite of what the Jedi are.
People. And there were some messages in there about, archaeology and also about what we believe in terms of myths and that sort of thing. But the real one is Star Wars, and that was done in the same vein that what I was saying about the patron creates the propaganda. And what I wanted to do was go back to some of the older propaganda, which was consistent through all of the societies, which is mythology, but to say, what did they all believe? Because they were all, this propaganda was created independently. Yeah. And what are the things that they all actually believed? We're talking relationships with your father, relationships with your society, your history, relationships with the gods. All of this stuff it's old, but they're psychological motifs that were created through storytelling, primarily oral storytelling, that explained what they believed in and who they believed in. So what I wanted to do is go back and find the psychological motifs that underlie that, because those grow out of a popularism, and to say that not all, but a majority of people, boys, have a certain psychological...
It seems many have lost touch with what the Jedi represent. It's not a religion, not in the slightest notions, is it? This is the act of trying to be something and only taking part in their meaning to use. But I admit I am not a Star Wars fan, as the same as most, only 10% really know of the true message behind Star Wars. Yes, I did say message. For most do not see what it represents. Most will just say it's about good versus evil, which it is, but other than that is really all they know. But when you talk about the characters and starship details, there are too many that will argue simple irrelevant details, like that ship is in the same class and shouldn't have this or that. This character can't be like that, or whatever. They pick at every last detail but fail to see the message. Okay, it's easy for me as I have other intentions. That are only to do with what the films, which are only the 6, and them that contain the message. But no one seems to listen to its creator either.
Things that make people say, hey, this is why we believe this stuff. And again, the crudest part of that, in terms of the religious, spiritual thing, is some people have taken those ideas and then distorted them, and you end up in a cult where they're using the psychological tools to make you adhere to their society, and part of it is they have to keep it closed.
And to them.
And to them. But it's the same thing. I mean,
George honors everything that Star Wars represents: compassion, family, love, morals, and draws attention to how things really are. George's vision is not just his own, although how he portrays it is unique. When you ask him what it is about, it is there right from the beginning with that first text. The knowledge that George has and his views about the world leave the many guilty to accept that it is about them. Those that portray good but are evil.
Learned in theory, but it works everywhere except it seems in politics, because they are doomed to repeat themselves every few years because they do not listen to history.
Where did the idea of force come from?
The whole thing in Star Wars was to take, ideas, psychological ideas, from social issues, political issues, spiritual issues, and condense them down into an easy-to-tell story of those stories. The Force basically came from, distilling all of the religious beliefs, spiritual beliefs, go all around the world, all through time, finding the similarities, and then creating an easy to deal with metaphor for what religion is. And the point is that in the very beginning, when you have people worshiping rocks and deer, they called it life force. They called it the Force. Right. That's what it was. And so where did the name come from? It came from basically life force, of what the more primitive religions believed in. And then you go through all the other religions, and they have the same thing. It's all the same. Whether you believe in God, don't believe in God, believe in religion, don't believe in religion. The issue is that you either don't believe there's anything else out there, which is a little, I think, would be hard to live with.
Are evil. Have been running the world for an unbelievable amount of time. It's about the myths of the past that were used to create something which was distorted and twisted, that it still affects the world today. It is in the daily news, as well as the governments that use it to do unto others many terrible things. He calls out his own country, and of their recent past, that became full of hate and anger for others, for which many suffer through the centuries, just for their own greed, and then scared of losing it they embark on dark quests.
At the same time, I believe something's out there, I just don't know what it is. I have no idea, or what I'd dare to guess, but I do know that religions aren't based on it. They're human psychological needs that have been put together mostly to create a society.
It is why the chosen one is a slave at first, to show how that hate turns into the evil that it became. From fathers to sons, the old myths of the past are reflected in the saga, in many forms. The reasons he had to make the film in England are clear, as he admits, because it wouldn't have been able to in the US. Due to the underlying issues that Star Wars shares with everyone, which are the way many, who see the world the same, and attempt to restore balance to the world, among this consistent fighting among the clones of religion. The multitudes that do evil in name of evil, only they don't see it. It asks why so many that follow in unison these rules that were obviously created by man. not the diviners would have you believe. That is why he stripped back all of it to the very origins of what he saw, was true. And from it, he saw that a long time ago, on a world that is galaxies away from what it is today, there was more compassion and balance. At the heart of that lost world, were the guardians, that is told in many the myths, and many that had been suppressed by those who caused these guardians to fall, turning into the organizations and the way the world is today. These guardians have many names which we are known by, depending on the culture you're from. In many, they were known as the stable ones, who brought stability to that golden age. Then there are some that refer to as the Skywalkers, after the heroes of the era, that were honored to be known by the star constellations Orion or Osiris. These were seen by many similar cultures all over the world, telling the same story, passed down through the ages, into myth and legend. In Egypt, there is the most obvious name, which was simply known as Jedi. As the new regimes took over with evil intent, these names became a myth, just as Han, Luke, and the others think of the Jedi in A New Hope.
Aspirational ideas.
It's about good and evil in us, as well as our institutions. So, and the idea that some of us think we're really great people, but in the real world we're not. We're terrible people. Make bad choices, but you run your life in a very selfish way, and you think you're doing good when you're actually not. And at the same time, it's how do democracies turn back into dictatorships? Why do people who have the power to have the freedom and everything turn it over to somebody who's going to take it all away from them? It's happened through history forever and ever, and all Star Wars is a way of updating that idea to say, watch out, because there are people out there who don't play by the rules, and if you're not careful, you're going to lose all your freedom. And at the same time, those people who may not play by the rules because they're selfish and greedy turn themselves into evil people who don't care about other people.
The prequels that many slated are necessary to the story. We see the fall of these guardians, and why they did. We see the ways in which the future empire is already in the making, as the good senator begins is a monopoly of the basic needs that all are dependent on. Trade, banking, mining, and media. Just as we have seen in our own world has, or was, foretold back in the prequels, that is one of the reasons it never started from the beginning. It would be too obvious to the darkness that controls the souls, minds and everyday needs of the people throughout the world. But it started from exactly where we are now, in our own world, rebelling against this unfair system. Whether it is about the millions of starving children who don't even have clean water to drink, or against the government who does as it wishes, although they are meant only to represent you, but never ask your opinion, when they are creating racial hate or building walls, afraid of what may be taken from them. All these ways have been told to everyone watching, along with the many quotes from the wise Jedi. But none of the so-called Jedi today do anything to stop all these wrongdoings. To do good is what you do, or to do bad is what you do not. The hopes of having many more who had seen these ways told in the saga, has really led to the destruction of the message and, of the Star Wars saga. With Disney, just acting on the will of those, who want the Jedi to stay hidden in the past. And yes, that is what I am saying, Star Wars is the finale of a long path set out by those who only see it, their duty to stand up against the Dark Lords, that own 98% of the world's wealth, and have been brainwashing billions into clone armies, in a never-ending struggle that is still raging today in the Middle East. Before our influences with the early comic books, there was no notion of man having powers, that was reserved only for the gods and demigods, but all that was changed with the likes of the superheroes that have stood the test of time, only to be taken over by the same company. Tell me you don't see the theme in the Avengers Endgame, with the supposed bad guy just wanting to do right. By losing half of the population there would be more for everyone else. Who could see the logic in that, and why the good guys are totally powerless to stop them? And only much later this is overturned. This is the thinking behind the Illuminati and other groups, but if there were a way that some group could stop them, how would anyone know who they are when they return from being written out of history by the victors? So when you hear the new films come out with sayings like "the Jedi must end," even Mark Hamill has made such a fuss about it, but yet many others do not. That is why you fail. But this A New Hope, so maybe there could be. It depends who listens to what they watch. Everyone needs a bit of
And
clarity.
they're just as strong today.
But it's a lot about good and evil. It's a lot about heroes.
It's about good and evil, but heroes, what makes a hero? What's friendship? What's the idea of sacrificing yourself for something larger? They're all really basic things. They say, well, you don't have to make a movie about that. It's very obvious, but it's actually not. It's not that obvious to a lot of people unless you have somebody tell you every generation that this is what our country believes in. So this is what we believe in. And with Star Wars, it was, you know, the religion, everything was so taken and put into a form that was easy for everybody to accept, so it didn't fall into a contemporary mode where you could argue about it. It went everywhere in the world because they could say, oh, the things I believe in are the same as that. Most people in the world believe exactly the same thing.
They share the same.
They share the same beliefs.
Yeah. They want to do well by their children. They want to live a good life.
It's something that I came up, that the idea of why do we think the way we think, why do we do what we do, why do we form our society the way we find it. It was something I did when I was about 8 years old with my mother when she was putting me to bed. I asked her a question. I said, Mom, if there's only one God, why are there so many religions? And it's a question that has fascinated me ever since. You know, and if you really look at it and you say, well, most people say, well, what's the difference between a Shia and a Sunni? What's the difference between a Catholic and a Protestant? Well, there isn't any different. Or we all believe in the Jewish God. But what about the Jewish God and the gods that came before? And the, you know, Buddha's a little bit different, but in the end, if you think of it as one God, you say, well, everybody expresses it differently, but it's still, you know, basically don't kill people and be compassionate and love people. And so that's basically all Star Wars is.